I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well.
Hello.
I'm a double. I'm a double.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian, and you are in for 2 full hours of Anna Solo. So I hope you guys are looking forward to that. We will be having a bonus episode for our members, and it will be behind a paywall. So members obviously will have access to that. If you're not a member, you can become one by going to tyt.com/join. Really looking forward to the show today. We're going to talk about a lot of really important topics. In fact, I had a really hard time putting the rundown together because I think there were a lot of important stories that were pitched by our incredible producers that we just didn't have enough time to fit into today's show. But I think one of the most important stories of the day that probably isn't getting as much attention as it should be getting has to do with foreign corporate landlords and the various foreign companies and war crimes that they're engaged in. It is insane. That story by The Nation is fantastic. But before I get to any of that, I do want to just say something kind of off the cuff. Today I really enjoyed having a conversation with a young man in Brooklyn by the name of Joseph. He is an Orthodox Jew, and we connected, and he was just kind of talking to me about how important he finds it to unite the country, meaning the American electorate, the American people. It's not even about politics. It's just about getting to a place where we love and respect each other regardless of political differences, which, by the way, I will admit is one of the more challenging things to do because politics tends to have a lot to do with identity and values, and some people, of course, have views that don't see others as equal to them, and that's something that we should always fight back against. But what I loved about him was that, we had a conversation, of course, about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. And if you know anything about Orthodox Jews, many of them are critical of the Zionist ideology. And he was just such a delightful person, and I really enjoyed talking with him. And it, again, reminded me, not that I need to be reminded, that anytime we're talking about the war crimes and atrocities that are being carried out by the Israeli government and the Israeli military, the IDF, it's important to understand that you can't conflate that with the entire Jewish population. And what I really appreciated was, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it's just true, right? Sometimes things change, people change, and I really appreciated an hour-long monologue that Tucker Carlson did yesterday that focused specifically on that. Now, on the same episode, he also interviewed me. You can watch that if you'd like, but I think you should definitely watch the hour-long monologue he did because it was about the importance of avoiding this belief in collective punishment. And so obviously that's come up a lot when it comes to the context of this genocide in Gaza. But we should be thinking about that in terms of our own perception of the world around us and how collective punishment doesn't make sense. We should judge individuals rather than take individuals and use them as representatives of an entire population of people and then make a judgment on an entire population of people based on that. Anyway, let's get to our first story of the day. I wanted to talk a little bit about, what the future very likely holds for the American people in our alliance with Israel. So, it turns out that Israel is basically looking to suck on the teat of the American taxpayers in a new 20-year military deal that attempts to essentially appeal to individuals who have a very superficial, surface level understanding of what America first means. So, in other words, this proposal by the Israelis to the US government uses lingo and rhetoric that's meant to kind of entice our government into agreeing and going along with this deal. So let's get to the details. Now, Axios's Barak Ravid, who always gets the scoop due to his close ties and connection to the Israeli government, reported that the proposal doubles the usual decade or 10-year long deals that the United States has previously signed with Israel. Now, understand when I say deal, this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the United States government taking out debt and then providing resources to Israel to buy American-made weapons to commit the atrocities they commit. It's that simple, right? For their security. We provide a nuclear power with $3.8 billion a year as a result of the previous 10-year deal that was signed under the Obama administration. That is actually set to expire in 2028. However, the Israelis would like to maybe rework that deal. And I'm pretty sure they're gonna look for more than $3.8 billion. So there have been 3 10-year framework agreements for long-term security assistance to Israel in 1998 to the tune of $21.3 billion. So that $21.3 billion, I want to be clear, is divided by 10, and every year they get a portion of that money. Then there was the deal in 2008. I don't know how much of a deal this is. I mean, it's a great deal for Israel. It's not really much of a deal for the United States or the American people. Sure, our weapons manufacturers love it. They get to make money off of this. But understand it's a redistribution of wealth from American taxpayers to a tiny group of weapons manufacturers. Let's keep going. The other deal, again, 2008, $32 billion. And in 2016, this was under Obama, $38 billion. Okay, so that doesn't even account for the 30 billion additional dollars that were provided to Israel since October 7th in order for them to carry out, well, everything that we've been seeing in the Gaza Strip. But Israel, again, actually wants to amend the military funding deal that's already in place, likely to get a little more cash out of us. So the current 10-year memorandum of understanding, that's what these so-called deals are called, signed in 2016 under Barack Obama, expires in 2028. Israel wants to conclude the new deal over the next year. So in regard to this new deal, Israel has floated 2 ideas. Okay, 2 ideas for changes in the upcoming security agreement. Now, I say upcoming security agreement because in my mind, this is just, it's gonna happen. There's usually no debate about it. Now, more and more Americans are waking up and realizing, hey, why exactly are we providing all these resources to Israel, a country that's actually doing better than the United States economically speaking? How does that make any sense? But these Americans aren't organized yet. There's more and more pressure toward members of Congress to reject these types of deals. It remains to be seen if it's going to be effective enough in time to prevent the Trump administration from, going along with this. But in my mind, I don't want to be a defeatist, but it's true. I think that Israel's very likely going to get what they want. So the first proposal was extending the agreement from 10 to 20 years, which would make it broader in scope and take the agreement through Israel's 100-year anniversary of the Nakba, or independence, as they like to call it, in 2048. So no thank you to that. That's how I would respond if I were a United States, member of Congress, or Donald Trump, if I were the president of the United States. I mean, imagine having all that power that you could essentially use for good, but instead, well, we know what our government likes to do. Now, the second change the Israelis proposed was to use some of the money for joint US-Israeli research and development rather than direct military aid. So this is where the so-called America First nonsense comes in, and I don't think this is actually America First. This could be in the field of defense tech, so essentially working with Israel on defense-related AI, no thank you, and the Golden Dome Missile Defense Project, an Israeli official said. Now, if you don't remember what the Golden Dome defense project is, President Donald Trump had floated the idea of the United States building an Iron Dome-like missile defense system, which, look, Israel is a tiny country, so the Iron Dome makes sense. It's a missile defense system that actually works and is effective for the most part because of the size of Israel. The United States, a little different. It's a little different. But make no mistake about it, there's nothing America first about this. This is all about the United States, a country that's currently drowning in now $38 trillion in debt, taking out more debt, handing over these resources to Israel so they can engage in their empire building and expansionist policies in the Middle East. And to that I say no, I do not accept. Our government should not comply, but our government will comply. Although I will say, with all these leaks coming out, all the Jeffrey Epstein information we're getting about various powerful people, either currently in our government or formerly in our government, maybe with the cat out of the bag and without potential blackmail being used by Israel to get our lawmakers to go along with their, genocidal regime, maybe they'll change their minds. Who knows? We'll see. I doubt it, but maybe. Now, how likely is it that Israel will get its way with this 20-year deal that, again, drags the United States into more debt on behalf of a foreign country and foreign military? Very. And why do I say that? Well, interestingly enough, the Wall Street Journal also published a fascinating piece that I think coincides with what was just reported in Axios. It's titled, "The Gaza War Has Been Big Business for US Companies." So I actually want to apologize to the audience because I have actually focused much of my ire toward the corruption in our government, the likely disgusting pedophiles in our government, and more importantly, the Israeli government having far too much influence over our politicians. But you can't forget the fact, as I think I've done a poor job in drawing attention to this. You can't forget the fact that there are people in the United States who benefit handsomely from what's going on in the Middle East, from our so-called alliance with Israel. And those are defense contractors, weapons manufacturers. And that's exactly what the Wall Street Journal detailed in this piece. And so I want you guys all to remember that the Wall Street Journal has its editorial board, which is unhinged, super right wing. Like their lips are like chafed from how much they kiss Israel's ass. So forget about them because they're separate from the news division, right? The news division actually sometimes puts out really, really great reporting. And this is an example of that. So Benoit Falcon writes that the American company that has brought in the most Israeli business since the Gaza war began is Boeing. The US greenlighted an $18.8 billion sale of Boeing F-15 strike fighters last year to Israel for delivery beginning in 2029. So it's not just, AIPAC or other members of the Israel lobby influencing our politicians. Remember, Boeing's engaging in campaign donations. So are all the other defense contractors who are, making quite a bit of money with what's happening in the Middle East with the genocide in Gaza. Other companies that have secured approved weapon sales include Northrop Grumman, which provides spare parts for jet fighters. Lockheed Martin, a supplier of high-powered precision missiles. In fact, let's check in with Lockheed Martin. How are they doing these days? Well, in its most recent annual report, Lockheed Martin said it had benefited from increased American defense funding related to Israel and Ukraine, notably munitions purchases. Revenue at its missiles division rose 13% just last year to a whopping $12.7 billion. So it's a huge cash cow for these companies. The alliance that the United States has with Israel isn't really beneficial to the American people or, quite frankly, the American government, with the exception of those who take the bribes and win their elections as a result of those bribes. But the people who really benefit from this alliance is the Israeli government those within the Israeli populace who think that the expansionist policy is the policy that makes sense, who feel entitled to stealing land in Gaza. They now occupy 58%. That's the latest report. Or the West Bank, where atrocities continue day after day, where Palestinians are driven out of their homes day after day. Israel's also occupying Lebanon as we speak, southern Lebanon to be specific. Now, General Dynamics, by the way, also is part of this. They are a defense contractor, weapons manufacturer, and they provide Israel with 120 millimeter shells for its Merkava tanks. So let's take a quick look at this fun graph because it's going to help you visualize just how much money the United States has poured into Israel since October 7th. That includes $18.9 billion for military aircrafts, $10.7 billion for missiles, $1.5 billion for military vehicles, and another $1 billion for artillery. And as we speak, the Trump administration is seeking congressional approval to provide another $6 billion in additional weapons to Israel. And that's according to the reporting in this piece by the Wall Street Journal. Think about what Trump is also up to simultaneously, or has been up to simultaneously. He's been fighting tooth and nail to deny Americans their full SNAP benefits. I'm talking about Americans living in poverty who are having trouble feeding their families. And when you look at the average benefit, monthly or weekly benefit to SNAP recipients, it's peanuts, but he has a problem with that. He's going to deny full benefits because of this whole government shutdown situation. God forbid, our government tap into reserve funds in order to make Americans whole when our Congress is too incompetent to do its job. But when it comes to another $6 billion for Israel, Trump isn't debating it amongst members of his cabinet. He's trying to convince Congress to authorize it, and they will. Because one thing that I know about our Congress is they're not really efficient at doing anything on behalf of the American people. But when it comes to war, when it comes to military spending, they're real efficient, real efficient. All right, let's get to our next story. This one, I'm not gonna lie, it was really hard to read. It was hard to produce. And I woke up in a good mood today. It put me in a really bad mood because it's heartbreaking to see how our people are being treated here on US soil, how our government doesn't do anything to protect Americans from what's going on. And it's all being done by a corporation that isn't even an American corporation, it's a foreign corporation. So let's get to the details of this insane story. The 2007 recession was absolutely devastating for the American people. By the time we hit the year, I think it was 2010, about 4 million Americans had been driven out of their homes, foreclosed on as a result of lenders engaging in these predatory loans and then packaging up those loans as securities and betting against them in the stock market because they knew they were toxic loans. Absolutely disastrous for the American people. Again, 4 million Americans kicked out of their homes. But Joseph Lubeck, who's a CEO of a corporate landlord that goes by the name American Landmark and owns apartment buildings in the United States, was actually super jazzed about it. He felt blessed. He felt blessed. Here's what he said in a 2023 interview with AMI magazine. I was very blessed in 2007 when there was an economic crisis. It was a good time to buy. Now, look, we are learning more about American Landmark. It's apparently an Israeli-owned company that owns massive swaths of US real estate. And what I want to know is, why is that allowed? Especially when you consider the fact that this Israeli-owned company also has ties to the IDF, deep ties to the IDF. They have deep ties to efforts in building illegal settlements in the West Bank, illegal settlements on land that was stolen from the Palestinians, of course. So, on top of all of that, let's say you don't care about what's happening to all those innocent people in Gaza. Let's say you don't care about the land theft in the West Bank. I would venture to think Americans would care about how renters are being treated by these mega corporate landlords, right? And if you're wondering, how does American Landmark treat its tenants? There's only one word to describe it: trash. They treat them like trash. Now, how do I know that? Well, let's get to the details. So a little bit about this company. American Landmark is a major corporate landlord with roughly 34,000 units concentrated in 111, what they're referring to as mega complexes. So they're these massive apartment buildings. And they stretch across 8 southern states. In fact, they specifically target southern states, red states, because they know that the housing regulations are a little more laxed and they can get away with essentially screwing their tenants over in the name of maximizing profits. And so 3 of the states that they're particularly concentrated in are North Carolina, Florida, and Texas. So here's what's going on. The company has a private equity structure, which they're very proud about, that allows investors from all over the world to essentially invest and to bet on the growth of this Israeli company's real estate portfolio. And here's what's even more repulsive about American Landmark. American Landmark is almost entirely owned by Elko, one of Israel's largest corporations. For years, Elko, via its Electra Super brand, has done extensive business in Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Why are we allowing them to buy and manage properties in the United States? Look, I gotta say, the United States, whenever there are economic interests in a foreign country, the US likes to tap into the war machine to get what it wants. Engage in coups, overthrow democratically elected leaders, do it by force. You gotta give the Israelis credit. They don't do it by force when it comes to the United States. They do it in a much more savvy, quiet way. And here's a good example of that. This morning, after we had put the rundown together, I was on YouTube, and I love Breaking Points. I think it's a great show. And I saw that they covered this story as well. And Sagar and Jetty had to do some throat clearing in the beginning of the story. He's like, look, we just want to talk about this because it's really bad for American tenants and it's a foreign-owned company. We're not saying Israel controls everything. I'm not going to do any throat clearing here. None at all. I don't blame Sagar for doing it. I'm just not going to do it. This is sick. It would be sick regardless of which foreign country was behind it once you see how they treat American tenants. But there's an added layer to this in that the very company that's involved, the very corporation that's involved, is doing business in the West Bank on illegal settlements. They are committing crimes, essentially. That land belongs to the Palestinians. It's internationally recognized as Palestinian land. And so this company is aiding and abetting actual international crimes. And we're just gonna totally be okay with them owning American real estate and evicting American tenants after they, of course, raised the rent as much as 24% in a single year. It's nuts, it really is. So Elko was founded in 1949, 1 year after the Nakba. And today it is the country's, meaning Israel's, third largest employer with over 23,000 employees. Elko also has deep ties to the Israeli military, including during the genocide in Gaza. So in 2024, the American Friends Service Committee put Electra on its list of companies that directly facilitate and enable human rights violations and violations of international law as part of Israel's prolonged military occupations, apartheid, and genocide. So we're gonna just allow them to be mega landlords in the United States and treat fellow Americans like trash. And that's what they've been doing. So the Nation and type investigations spoke to 43 American tenants, of course, who faced eviction cases that were filed by American Landmark. Now, Jeff Schuman, who's a tenant who had been evicted back in March from an American Landmark property in Jacksonville, Florida, said this while speaking to The Nation. I feel like they're predatory. They can put a person out on the street with no recourse. You want to increase the homelessness rate because we're short a couple of dollars? And I'm not condoning people not paying their bills, but sometimes people fall on hard times and they should be given a chance. But this is a mega corporate landlord and it's not even an American landlord, it's a foreign landlord. Why would they care about you? Why would they care about you when they could just raise rent to the tune of 24%? You have to read this incredible piece, guys, because there's so many details that we don't have time to get into. Granular details about how much they raise their rent, how far they're willing to go, how little they care about throwing people out of their homes, knowing that they have no place to go, knowing that they're gonna end up on the streets. They don't give anyone any chances. At one of their properties in Charlotte, North Carolina, that's called the Conrad, filings show that American Landmark's rate of eviction notices is 9 times the national average. American Landmark CEO Joseph Lubeck, it makes me so angry, man. It makes me so angry. American Landmark CEO Joseph Lubeck confirmed to The Nation that rent increases and displacement are part of the company's strategy. They say it out loud, just like members of the Israeli government, by the way. They say it out loud. So when they say it out loud, we should believe them. And then the anger that you might be feeling, the same anger that I'm feeling right now, should be directed toward our lawmakers who couldn't care less about what's going on here. I would be shocked if it's even on their radar. Here's what the CEO of American Landmark said. This is during the interview with The Nation. When we take over a property, the first analysis we do is, how much is the rent going to go up? And how many can afford to stay? We typically raise the rent anywhere from $100 to $400. So some people are absolutely displaced. Some people paying $1,000 in a distressed apartment are not going to be able to afford the $1,400 we're going to charge. On average, in all of their units, they raise rent every year at least 10%, at least. But of course, that's the average. In other cases, I like the one that I'm harping on about the 24%. Yeah, they raised the rent in a single year by 24%. That is insane when you kind of take a step back and look at the full picture, the full economic picture that Americans are facing, have been facing in this country. Consumer debt at an all-time high. Americans can't afford healthcare. Their premiums are doubling as a result of the Republican Party refusing to give Democrats the one concession they asked for, which is the extension of the ACA subsidies. These people who, unfortunately, we as the American people elected don't care about us. Democrat, Republican, most of them don't care about us. He also says, so based on the company's modeling, Lubeck said, only 55% of existing residents are expected to stay, while the remaining 45% move out. It's disgusting. This is disgusting. And what's also disgusting is that scumbags like Senator Ted Cruz spend all their time on X and on social media whining about Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens. He couldn't care less about his own constituents. He's a Texas senator. This is going down in Texas and North Carolina and Florida. Hey, Ron DeSantis, you care about this at all? You concerned about what's going down in Jacksonville? These people make me sick. And it's about time they made Americans in general sick, because we need to just vote these people out. They don't care about us. Anyway, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the latest revelations from the Epstein files. That and more coming up. Don't miss it.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan.
What's up, everyone? I gotta say, one of my favorite handles to see is CDN Norse Dog Dad, just because it sounds like a rapper name. So I just envision you as like a rapper. Anyway, thank you for the one gifted membership. Grizz, my homie from the streets, also sounds like a rapper. Gifted 5 memberships. Thank you so much. We appreciate you all. Kevin Shea says, Anna, as usual, it is a pleasure to see you at your home office. Love seeing you and love your bird wallpaper. Thank you so much. Marcos Dominguez says, who else is hoping for a Tool reference today? I haven't been listening to a Tool this week, but maybe I'll drop one when you least expect it. You never know. Ketsuki writes in and says, I hope that Netanyahu is able to pay for Fetterman's hospital stay. After all, it's only natural that when a pet needs medical attention, that the owner pays the expenses. By the way, I remember getting injured during my first trip to Spain. And man, was it nice to just like walk into like one of those pharmacies. And I don't know if it's an actual doctor, but they took care of me right away, like free of charge. I did something to my ankle and I was in a lot of pain. So I really appreciate countries that have that form of healthcare. I wish we had that here. Lady AF says, I saw that Tucker interview. It was great. Only had time for half his monologue though. Definitely go back and check it out because I think that monologue makes clear what Tucker's actual motivations are. And I do not think he's motivated by anti-Semitism at all. Grizz, my homie from the street, says, Anna Solo is heat. Only second to Cenk and Anna, salt and pepper and all. I gotta say, I really miss doing the show with Cenk regularly. We've both been so busy lately, but hopefully things will normalize soon. Arcane Eclectic says, don't tell Cenk, but I'm here for Anna. Thank you, I appreciate that. I'm sure that there are many people who are here for, watch the show because they like Cenk more. It's totally fine to have a preferred host. But I hope most of you at least like me. CDN Norse Dog Dad in our super chat says, Anna, like your ancestors, many New York City Orthodox Jews ancestors were welcomed by Palestinians. Only they were welcomed as refugees in 1946 and 47. Yeah, I wish I could have like a conversation with Joseph on the show, and maybe I can set that up because he was a really delightful person to talk to, and it wasn't even about Israel per se. He just really wanted to talk about, hey, what can we do to bring the country together? YTP Renewed says no more half measures, nationalize all housing. A non-dreamer says, Anna, how do I get in contact with TYT about another Israeli landlord corporation which is abusing tenants in Manhattan? We have court records and proof. Okay, I'm gonna try to get that info for you. I wanna make sure it's the right.
Psychotic breaks.
All right, everyone, welcome back to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. A non-dreamer was asking where to send tips to possible stories that we'd cover on TYT. The correct email to send it to is pitches@tytnetwork.com, pitches@tytnetwork.com. All right, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about if you're already at that stage in life where you're benefiting from one of our wonderful universal healthcare programs, which is known as Medicare, well, I want to make sure that you have the right Medicare plan. So Medicare annual enrollment is here and goes till December 7th. This time is pretty overwhelming for seniors who are absolutely bombarded by junk mail, spam texts, and robocalls. And this year is going to be more of a nightmare with big plans changing and confusion caused by the government shutdown. So even if you're happy with your current plan, you need to check it for 2026 because plans have changed and many have been canceled. So if you don't shop around, you could lose access to your doctors or end up overpaying for your plan or, the care that you're receiving. Nobody wants that. So check out Chapter because Chapter is the only Medicare advisor that looks at every plan nationwide to make sure you have the best plan for your needs. So they can review your options in under 20 minutes. And if you're on the right plan, well, then they'll just tell you you're on the right plan. You don't have to do a damn thing. But if there's a better plan for you, they'll help you switch. So they save the average person, or they save people an average of $1,100 a year, which is very nice. So if you're interested in this, just call 707-TYT-HELP. That's 707-TYT-HELP. All right. Let's get to our next story. Yesterday, I was on Tucker Carlson's show, and unfortunately, I didn't have an opportunity to comment on what's been going on with the Epstein files. But luckily, that story continues to develop, and I get to talk about it today.
House Democrats released those emails obtained from the Epstein estate, showing the convicted sex offender discussing Trump and seeming to suggest he had information he never shared. In a 2018 text exchange, someone whose name is redacted wrote to Epstein, "It will all blow over. They're really just trying to take down Trump and doing whatever they can to do that." The context of the message is unclear, but Epstein responding, "It's wild because I am the one able to take him down."
Oh, was he? Was he the one able to take him down? Interesting. Just a reminder that Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide when the first Trump administration was in power. And William Barr, whose father had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, was our attorney general. Just something to keep in mind. Now, for me, the Epstein files and the lack of transparency in regard to the Epstein files really doesn't have much to do with partisan bickering. So if you look at what's going down in Congress, it seems like the left is going after the right's going after the left. I would like to ignore that for the purposes of this story because I think members of both sides of the political aisle have been implicated in the Epstein files. There were some emails that I came across on X just this morning in regard to Hillary Clinton and how she allegedly had frisky relations with some people. Anyway, just look into that for yourselves. I actually want to focus on different elements of the Epstein files right now. And what's really, really interesting is that ex-Harvard President Larry Summers and his close relationship with Epstein for years after he was charged for soliciting a minor also come up. And we're gonna discuss that later in the show. Make sure you check out the live show every day at 6 p.m. Eastern time, because that's when we cover everything. You'll be able to catch every topic that we're talking about. But first, let's just focus on Trump for a minute, who Epstein claimed knew about at least some of the vile conduct that Epstein and friends were involved in, but didn't necessarily participate in it himself. And so in one email released by the House Oversight Committee that Epstein, by the way, sent to Ghislaine Maxwell in 2011, Epstein wrote, "I want you to realize that that dog that hasn't barked is Trump." And then they redact the victim, but victim spent hours at my house with him, meaning with Trump. He has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Now, Republicans say that the redacted name is Virginia, meaning Virginia Giuffre. And look, it is also very important to mention that she had, prior to dying by suicide, she had never accused President Donald Trump of any wrongdoing. Okay, so it's interesting because a lot of these pieces of evidence, a lot of these leaks kind of confirm that Trump didn't necessarily engage in the illegal, disgusting activities that Epstein and others engaged in. But it does seem to indicate that he knew about what was going on and chose not to say anything about it. But look, in another email, which Epstein sent to journalist Michael Wolff in 2019, he wrote the following. Trump said he asked me to resign, never a member ever, meaning member of Mar-a-Lago, I'm assuming. Of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. So that actually bolsters what Trump has been claiming publicly in regard to his relationship and fallout with Jeffrey Epstein, right? He had said something about how, he was stealing my girls, and their relationship soured after that. And look, the full context of the email isn't clear, but again, it does seem to be a reference to Trump's claim that he forced Epstein out as a member of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep. But Trump also admitted just a few months ago that he was also mad that Epstein stole girls from him that worked at Mar-a-Lago. And one of those girls was Virginia Giuffre. So in another email from February of 2019, Epstein tells Michael Wolff that a victim whose name was redacted worked at Mar-a-Lago. Trump knew of it and came to my house many times during that period, but that he never got a massage. So again, there are emails, there's some information here that seems to clear Trump of any, wrongdoing as it pertains to the rape of minors. But I also feel like Trump knew, and I'm sure others within our government knew what Epstein was up to and chose not to say a damn thing about it. And that really bothers me. And finally, Epstein wrote to former Treasury Secretary. Well, I'm gonna get to this in just a second, but let's actually wait for a second and talk a little more about this whole Trump situation. I don't know why Trump is panicking about the release of the Epstein files. I don't know why he's engaging in an obvious cover-up of the Epstein files. But the reason why it's important, in my mind, for us to have this transparency, well, two reasons. I would say one of the reasons is that, hey, if we do have people in positions of power in our government, and it turns out they're sick pedophiles, and maybe a foreign government has that dirt on them and as a result uses blackmail to control them, well, they should be ousted. The American people should know who those people are and they should be ousted. It's that simple. The other thing is, if all this information comes out and we're able to identify who Israel, possibly other foreign countries have dirt on, and we can oust them, maybe we can take our government back. Maybe we won't have foreign governments having this much influence over the foreign policy decisions of our government. You get what I'm saying? So that's why it's important to me. That's why the partisan bickering about this makes me roll my eyes so hard that my eyes get stuck in the back of my head. It's who cares? Okay, both parties contain scumbags. I think that's abundantly clear at this point. So at least for the purposes of this story, don't get caught up in the partisan bickering, because what matters the most is that we get the evidence and we get the information and we understand just how deep this rot runs within our government and institutions. That's what matters to me. Okay, we're gonna take a break because I'm obviously over. I'm going over, but when we come back, that's when I'll talk a little bit about the Larry Summers element of this. So stick around. What's up, everyone? All right, lots of comments. By the way, I'm totally against this as well. I want to be clear. I don't think any foreign country or corporation within a foreign country should own apartment buildings and be a corporate landlord here in the US. One True Coffee Dragon writes in and says, a former coworker lives in an apartment in Las Vegas owned by a Chinese company. He cut his foot on a broken tile in his bathroom and was hospitalized for sepsis. I am so angry. Like, this story makes me so angry. You guys have no idea. It really, really does. It's just so gross that this is happening and no one's stopping it. No one cares. No one cares to stop it. No one's in downtown LA. You guys might have seen this. There's this like high-rise building that, for whatever reason, the policymakers and political leadership in Los Angeles approved for like this Chinese-based company to build the skyscraper, right? Well, they go bankrupt and they just abandoned the project. And so it's just this giant, glass and steel building that's been abandoned in the middle of downtown LA, right next to what's formerly the Staples Center. It's called something else these days. But anyway, like anytime you go to a concert or sporting event at that area, it's like the first thing you see, this giant graffitied, abandoned, building that a Chinese developer just went bankrupt and wasn't able to complete. So are we just gonna leave it there? Like, it's wild what's going on in this country right now. Let's go to Funkin' for Fun, who says foreign ownership of US land was a big story for a while, then nothing. You're right about that. The land is still being bought. I wonder who got to the reporters. I wonder who got to the politicians, like the backroom deals, the corruption, all of this stuff. It's just disgusting. It's gross. It's wrong. And the only way it's gonna change is if the people demand that it changes. The politicians aren't going to change things out of the kindness of their hearts. They don't do anything for us out of the kindness of their hearts. They only act when they feel pressure to do so. Boomer Cat Dragon says, I realized something about Trump. He depends on his brand of strength and control. He'll tell you he makes other world leaders cower at his power. Really, though, it's like the balloon of hot air popped. He can't even control 3 loony women in his own party. I hope this is the beginning of the end. We'll see. All right, let's. All right, I got one more live read to get out of the way, and then we'll get right to Larry Summers and his name being referenced in the Epstein emails. All right, so Noble Mobile, they're super dope. If you're not happy with your cell service, check them out. TYT and Noble Mobile are teaming up to help you save money and take on the big wireless companies that are ripping you off. So Noble Mobile is the only wireless plan that pays you to use your phone less, not more, but less. So switch to Noble Mobile's No Bull plan and get unlimited data for only $50 a month. For any data you don't use, you actually get cash back that you can spend however you want. Like they're not telling you like, no, you're not allowed to use this money on soda or no, you can spend it on whatever you want. It's your money. So stop letting your unused data go into the pockets of billionaires and shareholders. Switch to Noble and take control of your data and save money at the same time. People who switch to Noble save an average of $500 to $1,000 a year on their phone bill. Just think about what you could do with that money. You take a little trip, a little weekend trip, maybe go out on a nice dinner with your loved ones. So switch to Noble today by visiting go.tyt.com/switch. That's go.tyt.com/switch. It supports TYT and our mission of delivering true independent media. Again, that's go.tyt.com/switch. All right, let's talk about Larry Summers. See what Larry Summers is up to. So we are learning quite a bit about powerful people in the United States of America, thanks to Ehud Barak's emails getting hacked and leaked to the public. That's a former prime minister of Israel, of course. You also have the House Oversight Committee, the Democrats within the House Oversight Committee, releasing some of the Epstein files that the Trump administration has been pretty desperate to cover up. And unsurprisingly, the documents that we now have access to implicate all sorts of powerful people in this country, left and right. And Larry Summers happens to be one of them. Now, Larry Summers apparently, by the way, former Treasury Secretary and Harvard President Larry Summers, that's the guy I'm talking about. Back in 2017, he actually received an email from Epstein that said, quote, "I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump. Not one decent cell in his body, so yes, dangerous." Or as my dad likes to say, dangerous. So that's quite the accusation, especially coming from a literal pedophile and sex trafficker. In response to the emails, the White House claimed that they proved that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. The only thing that matters in this whole scenario for Donald Trump is Donald Trump. For me, there are other elements to this that are far more important than Donald Trump's feelings or whether or not Donald Trump himself knew about this. I think he did know about it. I don't think that there is substantive evidence indicating that he actually engaged in the rape of minors. It might exist, but so far what we've seen doesn't really suss that out. And by the way, Trump also, of course, blamed the Democrats of using the Jeffrey Epstein hoax to deflect from their massive failures, which I'll admit, Democrats definitely have massive failures. There's no question about that. But the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, we're like literally reading his emails. How is that a hoax? Okay, so let's talk a little more about Larry Summers. As I mentioned earlier, Donald Trump is not the only person who has a little bit of explaining to do following the release of these emails. So it was already well documented that Harvard professor Larry Summers had a relationship with Epstein. But honestly, these new emails kind of give us a better sense of the extent of that relationship. And they do prove that their friendship was certainly much closer than anyone previously knew. So they regularly corresponded about women, politics, and projects at Harvard as late as March 2019, which was just months before Epstein's arrest and subsequent death. Now, remember that Epstein also had previously faced criminal charges related to the sexual exploitation of underage girls. This was back in 2006. So homeboy Larry Summers was all buddy-buddy with Jeffrey Epstein after that 2006 case, because apparently exploiting underage girls for sex, not that big of a deal. They're friends after all. The Miami Herald piece, by the way, anyone heard from Larry Summers? Like, what's up? You got anything to say about this? So the Miami Herald piece that investigated his sweetheart deal, meaning Epstein's sweetheart deal, and exposed his plethora of crimes, also came out in 2018. But for a full year after that, Larry Summers still buddy-buddy with Jeffrey Epstein. Great, okay. So apparently Larry Summers didn't see a problem with that. So in an October 2017 email to Epstein, Summers seemed to joke that women were less intelligent than men and complained about universities' response to sexual harassment allegations. He says, quote, "I observed that half of the IQ in world was possessed by women without mentioning they are more than 51% of population. I'm trying to figure out why American elite think if you murder your baby by beheading and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on, you're calling women stupid? Like, I can't even, what is this? I'm trying to figure, let me try to read this again. I'm trying to figure out why American elite think if you murder your baby by beating and abandonment, it must be irrelevant to your admission to Harvard, but hit on a few women 10 years ago and can't work at a network or think tank. Do not repeat this insight," in all caps. That guy used to be a Treasury Secretary in the United States. So what is he referring to here? He's referring to women, or a specific woman by the name of Michelle Jones, who was convicted of killing her toddler when she was a teenager. And after more than 20 years in prison, she was admitted to Harvard, to a PhD program in particular, but they later rescinded that acceptance. So that's what he was referring to. So at times, Larry Summers even confided to Epstein about his relationship with an unnamed woman in London. He referenced to his, or he referred to his request for advice as the Dear Abby issue, right? So once he recounted a tense conversation he had with this woman to Epstein, and this is what he wrote about it. At one point, he told Epstein the woman brushed him off with the phrase, "I'm busy." Summers told Epstein that he responded to the woman by telling her, "Awfully coy you are." Quote, "I don't want to be in a gift-giving competition while being the friend without benefits." I'm gonna throw up, Summers wrote. Summers recounted to Epstein, adding that she must be very confused or maybe wants to cut me off, but wants professional connection a lot and so holds to it. Yeah, Larry, you think anyone's actually interested in you? Like, have you looked in the mirror? Like, what are you talking about? I like the sense of entitlement. I think on some level, Larry Summers knows whoever this woman is, not interested in you because of your good looks or because you excite her or because of anything, really. You don't really have a great personality. You're not interesting. You're just a guy who has power and money. So if a young, attractive woman is showing interest in you, the likelihood is it has to do with the fact that you have power and money. So Epstein supported Summers's response to the woman, writing, "She's smart, making you pay for past errors. Ignore the daddy. I'm going to go out with the motorcycle guy." I mean, you reacted well. Annoyed shows carrying. No whining shows strength or showed strength. Okay. Gross, super gross. And by the way, any people watching right now who identify as Republicans, see, Larry Summers, not a Republican, Democrat. This is not a partisan issue. There are scumbags left and right when it comes to people in positions of power or people who formerly had positions of power within our government. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Epstein also donated money to projects that were led by Summers's wife, Alyssa New, and in response to the newly exposed emails, he did provide a response. He told the Harvard Crimson, I have great regrets in my life. As I have said before, my association with Jeffrey Epstein was a major error of judgment." Was it? I mean, he was prosecuted in the early aughts and you were still buddy-buddy with him all the way up to 2019. How do you explain that? So what happens now? So despite this latest email drop, there are still millions of Epstein files from the case that have not been released to the public. And so yesterday we did get a small step closer to making the release of the Epstein files happen. Because finally, Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson decided to swear in Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva after a 7-week delay. Many believe that the 7-week delay had more to do with the fact that Mike Johnson really did not want to hold a vote that would eventually lead to the release of the Epstein files. And I am certainly sympathetic to that theory. Now, she did provide the final signature, meaning Grijalva did. She provided the final signature needed to force a vote on the release of the Epstein files, but the bill overall is still very unlikely to pass in the Senate. And even if it did, Trump would still be able to veto it, right? Right now, his administration is carrying out a pressure campaign trying to get House Republicans to block the vote. So it seems like there's more to this that we just aren't privy to. And Trump knows what that something is, and he really doesn't want it to come out. So we'll see what happens. But I mean, it is kind of incredible that we have gotten some information, not through Congress per se, not through our incompetent loser lawmakers, but because of email leaks. And if you don't have the full picture, what ends up happening is people start thinking conspiratorially. And I don't blame them for doing that. If we're not going to have transparency, which helps us fill in the blanks, well, then people are going to come up with their own theories. So if you don't want that, maybe release the Epstein files, be transparent. I doubt they're going to do it, but I feel like some way, somehow, we're going to figure out what's actually going on here. And I love the fact that there is a significant portion of Trump's base. I don't know if they still consider themselves a significant portion of Trump's base, but nonetheless, they weren't lying. They actually do care about the deep state. They actually do care about transparency in regard to the Epstein files. Those people are honest Americans, and I really respect that. Hopefully we'll get more information, but for now, that's what we've got. Let's take a quick break. When we come back for the second hour, we'll talk a little bit about just how many foreign workers Trump businesses have been hiring.
Hey, Andrew, what's up?
Hey, Cenk, you ready to make the switch?
Yeah, I guess.
I promise it's easy, universal, basic, and you get income.
Yeah, you keep saying that. But you sure I'm gonna have coverage?
Of course you will. You think I would have bad service? I'm Andrew Yang. Of course I have good service.
All right, let's try. But I'm so bad at tech. So, wait. Should I do this thing of the hashtag business? Andrew, you're still on, right?
Yep.
Oh, I see it. No, wait, I don't see. Oh, yeah, I do see it. Here we go.
I actually did not realize that you'd be searching in real time, but I love it.
How much do people actually normally say?
Yeah, the average American is going to save between $500 and $1,000 a year on Noble.
Yeah, no. You know what I'm going to do, Andrew? Are you ready to become a Noble member? The two buttons are do it and go back. There's no going back. We're doing it.
We're doing it.
Here we go, Noble Mobile.
Oh my gosh, I just called you and are you now on Noble and not Verizon?
Why didn't you tell me it was gonna be super easy?
I know, man. Now you just stay away from your phone and watch the money roll in.
I can do that. Here you go, phone, yeah.
What the f? Cenk, you still there?
Andrew? Oh, well, at least I got Noble Mobile.
It was really just one take. The whole thing is wild.
It's in my shoes. It's in my shoes. Hi, I'm Brett Ehrlich with Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. This is Breaking News with Brett Ehrlich. Hi, Brett Ehrlich here. According to EPA head Scott Pruitt, climate change is not happening. He cited a meme on Facebook he saw. When pressed to back up this source, he said it must be accurate because the watermark said it was made by a scientist. So, your move, Truth.
At TYT, our mission is to boldly pursue truth, challenge the establishment, and drive positive change. At a time when corporate capture of our media, our government, and our politics is nearly absolute, everyday working people need a champion to fight for them and to push back against the powerful interests that threaten our democracy itself. At TYT, we're proudly progressive and call out corruption and duplicity wherever we see it, from Republicans, Democrats, or anyone else. And unlike mainstream news media outlets, we're not beholden to corporate advertisers, to defense contractors, to Wall Street, or to big pharma. We only have to answer to our audience, and for nearly 2 decades, we've accomplished that by delivering honest, timely, and insightful perspectives on the day's news without fear or favor or concern for whose toes we might step on or which powerful elites we might offend. And while we're super serious about the news, we also manage to do it in a way that is fun and lighthearted. We can do this together and serve our audience, and yes, have fun doing it.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT, TYT. The place is like 95% TYT on.
Favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Cenk and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have have to listen to the Young Turks.
The people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning. They seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you, guys.
I played baseball, but it was sort of slow. Shohei Ohtani. Wayne Gretzky.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Bart Kyle is wilding out today, absolutely wilding out with like his remixes, his Trump drops. I'm enjoying it for sure.
I'm a double.
Bart. Hilarious. All right, we've got a story that broke right before we went live today, and I think we should talk about it. Although it makes me uncomfortable, and it's just a pretty sad story that I think a lot of young women go through across this country. Sometimes it has to do with politicians, sometimes it doesn't. But it has to do with Matt Gaetz in this case, a former Florida lawmaker. So let's get into it. Last year, a House Ethics Committee investigation found that there was substantial evidence basically proving that former Representative Matt Gaetz had slept with a 17-year-old. Now, remember, this was that big DOJ case, big DOJ investigation into Matt Gaetz's conduct that was dropped eventually. And then the House Ethics Committee looked into it. And the Ethics Committee, they said, yeah, there's some evidence here. And that would have been in violation of Florida's statutory rape laws, of course, because you have to be 18 years old. A 17-year-old is considered underage and can't consent to having sex with an adult. The girl who Gaetz allegedly had sex with testified to the Ethics Committee and was a key witness in the investigation. But despite the investigation, Matt Gaetz was never charged with any crimes. And today, the girl is coming forward to share her story. In fact, she spoke to the New York Times. The details were actually provided to the New York Times by her lawyer in particular. And some of the information about the girl's background had recently been revealed through unsealed court documents. So the New York Times reached out to the lawyer specifically to verify the information. And here's what the lawyer said to the New York Times about the case, about the girl, and about this whole situation. The vulnerable circumstances most crime victims face are rarely known to the public. Although my client's circumstances were revealed outside of her control, I hope it helps for the public to see a fuller and more human picture of her than the press has reported on to date. So I think that's actually a really important perspective to keep in mind because oftentimes victims of rape or sexual assault also tend to get demonized. And that's why a lot of people who have been victimized in this way never come forward. So here's what the lawyer is stating. When this individual was just 17 years old and a junior in high school, her parents had recently divorced and her family just wasn't doing well, financially speaking. In fact, one of her parents was homeless, so the girl was living in and out of a homeless shelter. And at the same time, she desperately wanted to save in order to buy or afford braces to fix her teeth. In order to do so, at the time she was working at McDonald's. She began looking for other ways to make money and turned to a website that advertised itself as a sugar dating website that primarily connected older men and younger women seeking mutually beneficial relationships. Now, again, the girl was only 17 years old at the time, considered a minor. But on the website, she stated that she was 18 years old. So I'm gonna pause for a second because I think that detail, that element to this story is important. Because while the House Ethics Committee had said, yeah, there's substantial evidence proving that this sexual relationship happened, prosecuting it, I'm guessing, would be complicated and more difficult because of the fact that she stated she was 18 on this website. That's just my guess. I'm speculating here, but curious to hear or read what you all think about it. So through the website, she ends up meeting a guy by the name of Joel Greenberg, who was a close friend of Matt Gaetz. And over the course of several months, Greenberg repeatedly paid this girl to have sex. He also paid her extra money to take ecstasy before having sex. And before I continue, I just should have probably done this earlier. I want to give people a trigger warning because obviously this has to do with sexual assault and rape. And unfortunately, there are many victims like that in this country. So if you happen to be one of them, I just want to give you enough warning. Okay. So this is how Gaetz was involved, according to the reporting in the New York Times. On July 15th, 2017, Greenberg asked the girl and others to attend a party at the home of Chris Dorworth, a former Republican member of the Florida State House of Representatives, who at the time worked as a lobbyist for Ballard Partners, which is run by a major Trump fundraiser. The ethics committee heard testimony that the girl twice had sex with Gaetz that evening. For having sex with him twice, the girl was paid $400, according to testimony she gave to the ethics committee. And as we mentioned earlier, this individual was one of the key witnesses in the investigation that was carried out by the House Ethics Committee. Among the reasons prosecutors did not move forward with charges was their concern about whether she would be seen as a credible witness after being exposed to cross-examination by defense lawyers, according to people familiar with the investigation. So that's vague, right? Why did prosecutors feel that way? I would have liked a little more specificity in that regard, but nonetheless, Matt Gaetz has already responded to this New York Times story, saying, in response to questions about the girl, Gaetz said in a text message on Thursday, quote, "I never had sex with this person. This person threatened me with a lawsuit if I didn't pay her $2.3 million. She never sued me because her story is fiction." And look, guys, we are not capable of adjudicating this case, of investigating this case. And at this point, it's her word against his. But what I do know is that this story came out with the backdrop of the Epstein emails being leaked. And those emails have led to all sorts of revelations about people who either previously were in positions of power in the United States government or are currently in positions of power in the United States government. There are far too many questionable people with questionable character running the show here. And my question is, why is that? How is it that our government seems to attract some pretty immoral individuals? Now with Matt Gaetz, again, I don't have the capability or capacity to adjudicate whether or not this story is true, whether the allegations against him are true. But man, it's awfully specific. And when the House Ethics Committee comes out and says, yeah, there's evidence here, but we're not going to go forward with any effort to prosecute it or whatever. I mean, prosecuting cases can be difficult even if the allegations are true, right? So I don't know specifically what led prosecutors or astray, what convinced prosecutors not to pursue this and take it to trial, but it is what it is. I think it's important for everyone to know her side of the story because so far we hadn't been able to hear her side of the story. We've only heard from Matt Gaetz' side of the story. And that's all I can really say about this. I feel it would be irresponsible for me to say anything else. Reading those details was gross though, really difficult to read that. Anyway, let's move on to something entirely different. Let's talk a little bit about foreign workers, which certainly has the MAGA base very fired up at the moment.
Does that mean the H-1B visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration? Because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put
How did we ever do it before?
Well, Trump certainly walks the walk. He doesn't just talk the talk when it comes to hiring foreign workers. The real question here, though, is are Trump businesses hiring foreign workers because Americans can't perform these jobs? I'm going to let you decide what the answer to that question is. But as American conservatives debate just how many foreign workers should be let into the country, turns out that President Donald Trump has repeatedly sided with the corporate wing of the Republican Party that absolutely loves the cheaper labor that is afforded to US corporations by essentially bringing people over with visas to do jobs that Americans would get paid more to do. So Trump is certainly putting his money where his mouth is, because this year, the Trump Organization requested even more foreign workers than they had ever requested before. I'm not even kidding. So we'll note that the Trump Organization is a conglomerate made up of Trump's business ventures and investments. So there are multiple entities involved here. That includes Mar-a-Lago and other golf courses. You have the Trump Tower and other hotels, Trump Media and Technology Group, which runs Truth Social. You also have things like Trump Sneakers, Trump Coin, that's the crypto side of his business dealings, and much, much more. But when it comes to foreign workers, according to Forbes, the Trump Organization requests them for either agricultural work at properties like Trump's winery in Virginia, or hospitality work at clubs like Mar-a-Lago. Our economy is basically like a service sector economy at this point. We don't really manufacture things the way we used to decades and decades ago. You're telling me that Americans can't do service jobs or work hospitality at your clubs? Obviously, that's BS, right? So the Trump Organization requests H-2A visas for the agricultural workers and H-2B visas for the hospitality workers. Now, in theory, those visa programs are supported or supposed to be utilized when companies can't find American workers to fill these specialized roles. But we all know that's BS, right? Now, look, agricultural work, I would say, is a little bit different, because there are very specific instances that I can point to where states decided, you know what, we're going to start cracking down on employers who are hiring undocumented workers. And so they focused on agriculture. They focused on farms that were doing this. And so these farm owners, the executives at Big Ag, like they just decide, you know what, we don't want to mess with these federal regulations, so we'll go ahead and only hire American workers or people who are here legally. And you want to know what happened? They had a really hard time finding people who were willing to work those jobs, even after they had increased the pay and even offered some pretty sweet benefits. Now, am I saying that all Americans are like, no, we're not going to work in agriculture jobs? No, of course you're going to be able to find some Americans, but a lot of these farms had a difficult time doing it, or at least that's what they claimed, okay? And I believe them, because their crops were destroyed as a result. I would venture to say they didn't want that to happen. But nonetheless, when it comes to hospitality work specifically, I am not going to believe for a second that you can't find Americans who would fill those jobs. And the notion that Americans don't have the talent to fill those jobs is not only laughable, but incredibly insulting. What he said in that interview with Laura Ingraham was disgusting. So let's get to some numbers, shall we? Now, to enlist foreign workers, businesses need approvals from the Labor Department and the Department of Homeland Security. So just how many foreign workers is the Trump Organization attempting to hire? Well, the Trump Organization sought to bring in at least 184 foreign workers in 2025 for temporary positions. And that's actually a notable increase from previous years. The country's visa requirements have risen steadily in recent, So the company's visa requests have risen steadily in recent years, from 121 in 2021 to a record 184 in 2025. During Trump's 5 years in office, the Trump Organization filed to bring in at least 566 foreign workers. And guys, look, I'm not necessarily against bringing in, a restricted number of foreign workers, but I'm sick of being lied to about why they're being brought in. Okay. Look, there might be some very specialized roles in which you can maybe make an argument that H-1B visas make sense, right? We're bringing in a small group of specialized experts in a specific field. It makes sense. But generally speaking, a lot of these visas have to do with helping US-based companies and corporations save on labor costs. They know that they can pay these individuals less than what, let's say, a college-educated American would expect to be paid. Let's just keep it real. And if you're a foreign worker, you can't unionize. I'm going to venture to say that that's also a motivation. When workers unionize, they have more of a seat at the table. They're able to negotiate through collective bargaining, and companies don't like that. So it's really a big win for corporations, which is why it's so unsurprising that someone like Elon Musk is totally in favor of this. We'll get to him in just a minute. But I do want to just say that's a notable increase, right? 121 in 2021 to 184 in 2025 in regard to the number of foreign visas that the Trump organizations are requesting. And these are jobs that Americans are definitely capable of doing. So the jobs, primarily servers, clerks, housekeepers, kitchen staff, and farm workers, pay between $15.58 and $27.91 an hour per Department of Labor listings. But apparently, Americans can't have those jobs. The Trump organization has sought to hire 2,033 foreign workers since 2008. And again, all of this is relevant because at the moment, the right wing is kind of fighting about this issue. Because look, I think Trump's core base, the people who genuinely believe in America first, who genuinely thought that Trump was going to engage in a tariff policy in order to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States, they're angry because they realized, oh, this guy's a con man. To which I say, yeah, this guy's a con man. He lied big time. And it's the cat's out of the bag in so many different ways, right? The Epstein files cover up has really infuriated a faction of the right. The fact that Trump, with his own companies, is requesting more foreign workers take these jobs that could be given to Americans. That's infuriated a portion of the American right. And you probably won't be surprised to know that Elon Musk is arguing in favor of bringing in foreign workers because he himself loves underpaying foreign workers. Let's take a look at what he posted on X. He says, President Donald Trump is right. We must distinguish clearly between companies that need to hire critical world-class talent from other countries versus companies that simply hire lower cost non-US employees to increase profits. You mean like Donald Trump? And by the way, why don't we produce those specialized workers here in the United States with our world-class higher education system? It is kind of amazing that our policymakers have failed the American people to the point where you have these corporate CEOs feeling real comfortable coming out and saying, yeah, Americans are unqualified scum and we need to import people from other countries to do these jobs. That's insulting beyond words. So anyone who's angry about this, I don't blame you at all. And I'm not going to read the rest of his post. I don't really care to. You can do that if you want. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to actually talk a little bit about where Trump stands in the polling on various issues. How is his base feeling about him? But what I've really been looking forward to talking about is a really disgusting moment, if you ask me, that occurred during Megyn Kelly's live audience tour that she's doing. It involves Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, and more. It's a curious story to say the least. I'll share that with you and more when we come back. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to our, I was going to say bonus episode, but we're not there quite yet. Welcome back to our social break. Man, there's a lot of super chats. I want to make sure I read as many of them as I can. So let's go to Anon Dreamer. I read your comment. CDN Norse Dog Dad says, Anna, I'm the dad of Canadian Norse dog Samantha. FYI, she thinks Charlie is a hot boy dog. He is a hot boy dog. But I think Charlie's into other boy dogs, to be honest with you. I've noticed that about Charlie. It's hilarious. We were roughhousing earlier, just like playing. He loves to play tug of war. And then I got a little too, I guess, excited. And he did like that little dog noise that they do when they're like a little bit hurt. And every time that happens, which isn't often, it's like, I don't know, my heart gets like just destroyed. It's like the worst sound in the world. And now I feel guilty. I'm gonna give him extra treats. Michael Cotavelli says, Jewish Palestinian group standing together is currently, sorry, I just lost your, okay. Jewish Palestinian group standing together is currently doing a US speaking tour from Israel. They helped organize a bunch of protests in Israel against the genocide. Any chance of having them on for an interview? Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm not against it, that's for sure. Box writes in and says, we are an over-credentialized society. I totally agree with you on that. Most people are brainwashed into thinking you need school to do work. You don't. We are perfectly capable. Other places get kids to do it for us. They just want foreign workers who they know they can exploit. Like, that's the way I see it when it comes to these companies and corporations. Let's go over to our members section where Box sent a TYT gift membership. Thank you so much. Duncan, your mate, says those files/tapes could potentially wipe out half of both houses, ambassadors, international financiers. Talk dirty to me. The deeper the digging, the more damage they will cause. They are not hiding innocence. Yeah, I mean, I'm here for it. I really am. These people should not be in positions of power. Jay Lever says, and thank you for being a member for 32 months. You hope we at least like you. You're probably most of our political spirit animal. We love you, Anna. I love you too. Thank you so much for saying that. All right, we got to get back to the show. Let's do it. Welcome back to TYT. I'm Anna Kasparian. And this next story is a little bit out of left field, but I've been thinking about it a lot because one of the things that you sometimes get confronted with if you're doing like a live event or you've agreed to be on a panel where you know that there's going to be a debate. Like, for me, it's important to just ground the conversation or debate from a foundation that has like facts. Like, we agree on the facts, but now let's debate why we have a different perspective on the issue, right? And sometimes you will find yourself in a situation where someone just kind of like lies in your face and you can't respond to it. Or they'll cite something super obscure that you know nothing about, most people know nothing about, and they'll make a bold claim about it. And since you don't know anything about what they're referencing, you're unable to defend the person they're attacking. I mean, that happened recently. I was on a CNN panel on election night, and a woman on the panel had cited some obscure blog post that Zoran Mamdani allegedly wrote, where he was minimizing rape and sexual assault. Anyway, it turns out it was completely BS, but I was not equipped to defend him because I had no idea what this woman was talking about. I give you all that as a preface to the story we're about to talk about, because it has to do with a lie that was told in real time to Megyn Kelly, and Megyn Kelly was not able to defend herself or defend the person who was being attacked. So without further ado, let's get to the details.
And he lied to Megyn Kelly's face, and definitely not a good idea to lie to her face and try to humiliate her on her own tour. I personally would have strongly advised against it, okay? If somebody said, is this a good idea? I would have said, you know what, let's maybe not do that. But it happened. And it's important to stress here that this was not just a simple mistake that Ben made.
I think that what Candace Owens is doing right now is evil. It is evil what she is doing right now.
My position is it's really none of my business. And
why is it? But I have a question. Why is it none of your business? I mean, you comment on these things for a living.
I'm not mother of the internet.
No, but if this were on the left and somebody were accusing Charlie Kirk of his wife having murdered him, I assume that you would be talking about it.
Is that what Candace is accusing Erica of?
Yes.
There is quite a bit of infighting happening in what is considered to be the American right, right-wing pundits, conservatives, and it really has to do with disagreements about Israel. Let's just keep it real. There is the half of the Republican base that wants to defend and support anything and everything Israel does. And then there's the younger crowd that's a little more savvy to the reality that the US alliance to Israel has been detrimental to the American people. I'm not on the right, but I certainly agree with the latter. Candace Owens, to her credit, also agrees that the US relationship with Israel is detrimental, and that has made her a target. She got fired from the Daily Wire as a result of her commentary about Israel. And things have only gotten more spicy since then. Now, Megyn Kelly is currently doing a tour in front of live audiences, and she's had various figures on her, tour to speak about various issues. Some of them spicy, some of them just the typical policy-related stuff. And recently, she had Ben Shapiro on. Now, what was interesting is, for the first time in my life, I'm watching Candace Owens's show pretty much on a regular basis. I think, she says things that I don't agree with, that's for sure. But I really appreciate what she has to say about what's been going down in Gaza. I agree with her on Israel for sure. And I find what she has to say about the investigation into the assassination of Charlie Kirk both fascinating, and I think what she's doing is justified because our authorities, our FBI, has, in my opinion, bungled this investigation. And there are all sorts of weird inconsistencies that I personally would like answers to. Now, some people are uncomfortable with Candace Owens doing her own investigation, acting as a sleuth. But the reason why I tell you guys I watch her podcast regularly is because I know what she has claimed and what she hasn't claimed. With that in mind, let's take a look at what Ben Shapiro had to say about Candace Owens as he was on one of her, live speaking tour events.
I think you and I differ on our angle with regard to, for example, Candace Owens. I think that what Candace Owens is doing right now is evil. It is evil what she is doing right now. Okay, and I say that again.
But what?
Because
I didn't opine on whether it's evil or not. But my position is it's really none of my business. And
why is it? But I have a question. Why is it none of your business? I mean, you comment on these things for a living.
I'm not mother of the internet.
No, but if this were on the left and somebody were accusing Charlie Kirk of his wife having murdered him, I assume that you would be talking about it.
Is that what Candace is accusing Erica of?
Yes.
Of murdering her own husband?
Now, Megyn Kelly, from what I gather, is not watching Candace's show, certainly not as regularly as I have recently, right? So she's confronted with something that I imagine she would find appalling, but it's a lie. Candace Owens has never said anything about Charlie Kirk's wife being involved in assassinating her own husband. She hasn't even alluded to it. In fact, her audience, if you read the comments, a lot of people in her audience are like urging her to look into Erica Kirk. But all I've seen her do is defend Erica Kirk. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like a lie like that, whatever you might feel about Candace Owens, you have to be fair. And a lie like that is pretty freaking gross. And it's especially gross to do it in real time to someone who's supposed to be your friend in order to get that individual to engage in a public condemnation of someone you don't like, Candace Owens. I thought that was so below the belt and honestly a pretty scummy thing to do. Here's the second part of that exchange.
She's accusing TPUSA insiders and other members of the right wing, including Seth Dillon, of being involved in the murder of Charlie Kirk, yes.
Okay. Like I said, I don't take in that content, which is an honest statement. I don't have time to watch Candace's show.
I believe you. But the point that I'm making is that when
what I understand
friendship
Candace
should
to
not,
have
in our
been
business,
doing.
I think it's important. Listen,
Candace
friendship
and I are
should not
friends.
trump.
We don't even know each other.
I understand, but even with Tucker, friendship should not trump our manifest requirement to speak out when people do and say things that are both detrimental to conservatism and morally wrong.
So I think part of the reason why this moment triggered me in particular is because, and I want everyone who's watching this to know this about me, just in case something comes up in the future where people try to egg me on or encourage me to denounce someone that's close to me or denounce someone I work with. Don't come at me and urge me to condemn people to prove my virtue. You get what I'm saying? Like, I find that so utterly disgusting and gross. And it's happened to me in that, people were mad at me over an opinion that I have. And then like a little mob will reach out to John Idarola or whoever I'm associated with and demand a public condemnation of my opinion and what I had to say. And I just want to be very clear about how I feel about individuals who give into that pressure. It's bitch behavior. People are allowed to have their own opinions. And if they decide on their own that someone else has said something, a friend of mine, a colleague of mine has engaged in commentary that I disagree with, if they themselves decide on their own to respond to it or comment on it, that's totally fine. That is 100% okay. But giving into a mob that's like, do you condemn? Do you condemn? Do you condemn? You need to condemn. Do you condemn? They're the worst people. I can't stand them. And I think even less of the individuals who give in to that pressure, just keeping it real. Now, Megyn Kelly didn't give into that pressure and later decided to fact check the claims that Ben Shapiro made. Let's take a look.
He said that Candace has been claiming Erica Kirk was behind the murder of Charlie, which I had not heard. And I was taken aback because that seems like something I would have heard. It's so crazy. And I have since learned it is not true. Candace has not made that claim. And in fact, I've now seen several clips of Candace specifically defending Erica Kirk and saying she would never make a claim like that about Erica and that she is open-minded to other people at Turning Point. That's obvious. She's been making that point. I had heard that point. But she's specifically been defending Erica Kirk, and she's been saying she does not think that of Erica. And in fact, if you read her comments, she's under pressure to make comments about Erica. And so far, what I've seen, she hasn't.
So the facts matter. You might think what Candace is doing is wrong, but you have to at least be accurate about what Candace is actually saying. You can't, smear her as someone who's going around pointing fingers at Erica Kirk when that's not what's actually happening. Now, just based on what she has said, she does seem to think that there are people within the Turning Point organization who are part of some sort of cover-up. And to be fair to her, she keeps providing, evidence in the form of text exchanges and that end up, bolstering or reinforcing the arguments that she's making. But again, I just want all of you to consider if someone close to you, and Charlie was close to her, was publicly assassinated like that, and you have Kash Patel as the head of the FBI, and from the very beginning, he's bungled all of it. Yeah, you're gonna wanna know the truth. You want justice for your friend. I would be beside myself if I were in Candace's shoes. And by the way, let's also acknowledge, she is grieving the loss of her friend. And when you're in the process of grieving, I remember after Michael Brooks died, for 6 months straight, I was probably the most unbearable person to work with. I was deeply depressed. And I remember Brett Ehrlich at one point, because I like snapped at him. I don't even remember what it was about, but Brett Ehrlich, to his credit, finally spoke up and he's like, you got to stop doing this. And that was when I realized I've been grieving. I have not processed it in a healthy way. So that's when I just decided I'm going to get help and I'm going to speak to a therapist and try to get myself out of this depressive state because I'm taking this out on other people. You don't know how people handle this level of grief. And so, I just think even if you disagree with Candace Owens, have a little bit of grace, maybe a little bit. Now, with that in mind, Candace Owens has weighed in on this whole debacle as well. Let's take a look at what she has to say.
This was not just a simple mistake that Ben made, right? That's always a possibility that Ben really thought maybe he's backstage and sees something on Twitter and somebody said, Candace just said that Erica Kirk murdered Charlie, and then he gets on stage and he repeats it. Maybe it's just an accident, highly unlikely, but of course you have to run that plausibility. But we can now confirm that that certainly was not the case. This was not a simple mistake because in the days following it, he didn't recant. He did not modify, he did not correct. He has a platform. He could have just come out and said, oh, I got the details wrong. Nope, this was a premeditated and a post-meditated lie, okay? Intended to morally blackmail Megyn into a position to decide right now on the spot whether you are going to stand with evil Candace, who was accusing Erica Kirk of murdering her own husband. And that lie backfired gloriously.
It did backfire, and it was a gross thing to do. It really was. This is how you lose. Like, I just think I think those on the right who are very concerned about criticism toward Israel, who want to do anything and everything possible to protect Israel, including smearing their own fellow Americans into silence, basically, so they stop criticizing Israel. Your actions are making things worse for your cause. So stop doing it. Just stop doing it. Don't lie. Don't pressure people during their own tour to condemn people that you don't like. Because guess what? The entire world sees it. The country sees it. They don't like it. So it's not helping your cause. It is backfiring. I can't stand this kind of behavior. Just be honest. And if you don't like what Candace is doing, that's totally fine. Just say it. Share your point of view. But don't smear people. Don't lie about people. And more importantly, please stop with the guilt by association garbage. Megyn Kelly will condemn Candace if she feels the need to do it. She's her own person. She has agency. Everyone has their own agency. They can make their own decisions. Please stop with like the mob behavior. No one likes it. We got to take a break. When we come right back, we'll talk about Trump, where he lands in the polling on various issues. Just a little bit of a spoiler alert, not doing so well. Come right back. I love when you guys write in when I ask you to share your opinions about the stories we're doing. So Mountain Star Studio writes it and says, credibility issues with Greenberg versus Gates. I think, yeah, I do think that's probably the reason why prosecutors didn't move forward with that case. And again, it's my speculation. I don't know if this is for sure the reason why, but I think lying about her age on that website probably was going to make the prosecution a lot more difficult. But the rest of the comment is on Shapiro versus Candace. I don't know, but I know Candace is correct in questioning the complicit cover-up, corruption. Yeah, I just don't trust Kash Patel, and I don't blame anyone else who doesn't trust Kash Patel. Anyway, Mountain Star Studio also says Candace is fighting for truth. Other narratives are sus. Ben is busted for lying, gloriously backfired on the shameful shamers, ad hominems versus confronting the actual message. Bring the doubt. Yeah, that's the thing, right? For the group that love to dismiss people as being bad debaters because all they do is engage in ad hominem attacks, they're engaging in a lot of ad hominem these days and not really fighting back with substantive arguments. It's really interesting stuff. In our member section, we have Preston the Dragon, who says, yeah, he assumed she was at least 18. So while he's morally guilty, he simply didn't know she lied. Still gross as F though. Yeah, especially when you read the details about her family and what she was going through and how she was like doing what she could to try to afford braces. We live in the richest country in the world, man. And there's so many people living like that and suffering like that. Arcane Eclectic says Candace got fired from the Daily Wire, and a year and a half later, she has twice as many subscribers as the Daily Wire. Yeah, that's why I think it's really important to, instead of trying to censor people or silence them, it's way more effective to just engage in the debate. Like if you have an argument, if you disagree, just engage in the debate. I don't think firing Candace Owens worked out so well for the Daily Wire. John Branch, Deja, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, and Student Socrates are brand new members over here at TYT. Thank you so much for joining. We will have a members only bonus episode for you right after our main show. So in about 12 minutes. All right, Amanda Lorian 84 says, Anna, I have a community college salsa class performance coming up, and I bought a vintage 50s dress with a petticoat for it. Thought you might dig both those things. I definitely dig both those things. I'm so excited. You absolutely have to like get me video somehow of the performance. I'm super excited for you. My new red salsa shoes are coming tomorrow. I'm straight out giddy about it. Love it. I don't know if I'm gonna get in trouble for reading this comment, but Micrograms in our Twitch community says, I bet Anna hates doing these ad reads. Thank you, Bart. All right, let's move on to our next story.
Donald Trump is underwater on basically every single issue he ran on in 2024.
We're talking about Trump. He, of course, at least constitutionally, can't run for another term, but his Republican Party is up in the midterm elections. They should be scared. SH blank, blank, blank list.
Over the course of President Donald Trump's second term, CNN's Harry Enton has pretty objectively, if you ask me, covered Trump's approval ratings. And he's given Trump credit when his ratings are up. But that's not what's happening today. As of right now, as you just saw, Trump's approval ratings are pretty catastrophic across the board. And honestly, if you've been paying attention, especially with the divisions within Trump's own base, you wouldn't really be surprised about this. But let's get granular here. Let's figure out what's going on. And we'll start with Trump's polling on the biggest headline in the news right now, the Epstein files. Let's watch.
Let's take a look at Trump's net approval rating on the issue. Look, they're all in red. They're all in the negative territory. But on immigration, he's 5 points underwater. Foreign policy, 8 points. Trade and tariffs, he's 17 points. The economy, 18 points. But look at the Epstein case. He is 39 points below water on the Epstein case. His net approval is 39 points in the negative. My goodness gracious. Approve of the Trump admin on the Epstein case in early July, right when you had those DOJ droppings, right? It was 17%. Look at where we were by late September. The latest poll I could find it, 20%. Republicans who approve of Trump's job as president, 87%. That is basically in line with the long-term average, 85, 90, 95%. But look at the Trump admin's job on the Epstein case. Just 45% of Republicans, less than half of Republicans are even buying what the administration is telling. Simply put, it is his worst issue by far.
That percentage of Republicans, 45% approve of how Trump is handling the Epstein files. That's amazing. That is amazing. Because sometimes we'll do stories about how Trump is performing on, let's say, immigration. Immigration's a perfect example, right? And the results of the poll will say like, oh my God, 65% of Americans don't approve of how Trump is handling immigration. But then once you take a look at how, it's divided or divvied up based on political identity, it's like 98% of Democrats disapprove, 55% of independents disapprove, but like most Republicans obviously approve. That's not the case of this situation with the Epstein files. And it probably also has to do with the fact that promises were made, but promises weren't kept. And more importantly, he refuses to really take any responsibility for how he's handled this situation. He just wants people to stop talking about it. That's not going to happen. And he is refusing to take any responsibility for the fact that his own base is absolutely furious about this. So yesterday, he wrote on Truth Social, the Democrats are trying to bring up the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Not just Democrats, Trump, not just Democrats. A lot of Republicans are also bringing up the Jeffrey Epstein files. It's not a hoax. We've been reading some of his emails that have been leaked recently. But anyway, Trump continues to say, because they'll do anything at all to deflect on how badly they've done on the shutdown and so many other subjects. Only a very bad or stupid Republican would fall into that trap. Nice. So go ahead and also insult large swaths of your base as stupid and very bad. I'm sure that'll work out real well for you. But Trump has no safe harbor apparently, because as you saw in the last clip, his approval ratings are poor for all of the major issues that, quite frankly, voters thought he would be better on. That's why he won the popular vote. That actually brings us to the economy. That's his second least popular issue. Take a look.
You go back to October of 2024, who did Americans trust more in inflation, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? They trusted Donald Trump by 9 points on average. You jump over to this side of the screen, those same exact polls have him way underwater, 26 points underwater on his net approval on inflation. More responsible for the current economy, Trump or Biden? We're talking 54%. The clear majority of voters say Donald Trump's more responsible for the current economy than just 21% who say Joe Biden. I will note, I've seen this in poll after poll after poll. Trump attention to lowering costs, not enough. We're talking about 3 in 4 Americans, 75% overall, who say Trump's not paying enough attention to lowering costs. And even among Republicans, that solid Republican base who oftentimes approves of Trump's job by 85, 90%, 57% of them say that Trump's not paying enough attention to lowering costs.
Donald Trump is looking like my favorite frying pan. All right. Teflon has totally worn out. I'm kidding. I don't use Teflon pans. They're really bad for you. You shouldn't use them. But nonetheless, Teflon Don no more. And it's such a relief, guys. Now, look, to be fair, he did handle the economy better in his first term. Like, he wasn't so brazen in how much disdain he has for the American people in his first term. In the second term, he's going balls out. He doesn't care. And no, he hasn't focused on affordability at all. In fact, he has decided to take a bad situation, an inflationary economic environment, and make it worse through his ridiculous Liberation Day blanket tariff policy, which of course, is being challenged in the Supreme Court at the moment. And hopefully the Supreme Court remembers that even though Congress is at this point useless and they've ceded so much power to the executive branch, it's still supposed to be a co-equal branch of government, and they're the ones who get to decide taxes, and tariffs are taxes. Now, I'm sure Trump had a little more leeway in his first term because he did targeted tariffs. That's not the case this time around. And so everyone's hoping that the Supreme Court, makes the right decision and passes down the right ruling. We'll see what happens with that. But again, that's huge. 57% of Republicans are not happy. They don't think Trump has done much to deal with affordability. That's not good for Trump. Look, more importantly, that's not good for JD Vance, because we know how Kamala Harris was hurt in her campaign because she had difficulty distancing herself from Joe Biden. Now, in my opinion, she wasn't a great candidate in general. But her inability to distance herself from the Biden administration because she was the VP hurt her. So just something to keep in mind. Now, when you look at the data, you can also see that despite all of this chaos and the havoc in Trump's first term, Americans actually were comparatively doing better. This is before the COVID pandemic. Obviously, the COVID pandemic was a complete and utter disaster for the economy. But prior to that, Americans were comparatively doing better. They were better off when he left office than they were, after Biden's term. So here's some info from the Wall Street Journal. Total household net worth rose 19% through Biden's first 3 years in office, according to Federal Reserve data, not much less than the 23% through Trump's first 3 years. So they're not including the COVID pandemic, and I think that's the fair thing to do here. However, adjusted for inflation, net worth was up just 0.7% through Biden's first 3 years, compared with 16% through Trump's first 3 years. Look, obviously, I have a lot of negative things to say about how Trump is governing the country. So please don't take this as a blanket defense of Donald Trump. But I will say this, and I want particularly those in the audience who consider themselves on the left to remember. In COVID and the COVID lockdowns happened in March of 2020 when Trump was still in office, obviously. And what happened after that were multiple rounds of, economic relief for Americans, including the stimulus checks, yes. But more importantly, the federal government decided to bolster state unemployment benefits. So Americans who were forced to stay home because of the government not the government, but the business shutdowns and all of that, were able to pay their bills. So it doesn't surprise me that after he left office, net worth for individuals in this country was a little higher. And those unemployment benefits, I'm just gonna say it because my husband was a bartender at the time and he lost his job, were generous. Now, of course, most lawmakers, especially Republican lawmakers, think they were way too generous, and they point to our national debt as justification for why they feel that way. How about we stop going to war? How about we stop funneling our resources to Israel? How about we stop, bombing Middle Eastern countries on behalf of Israel? I mean, we didn't have any debt when George W. Bush came into office. After 9/11 and after everything we did in the Middle East, that's when our national debt skyrocketed. So I think making Americans whole after the government has decided to force shutdowns in response to a global pandemic is the right thing to do. And to Trump's credit, in his first term, he did do that, along with lawmakers in Congress, of course. But this time around, homeboy do not care. He does not care about you at all. He's brazen about it. It's obvious. And it's hurting him in the polls. It is what it is. All right. Bonus episode is next. We're going to talk about Kash Patel's girlfriend and her defamation lawsuits and more. Don't miss it.
Bow chickie wow wow going down.